The price of milk. The cries of the infant sliced through the sterile air of the Fairbanks Manor, a haunting, fragile sound in the echoing expanse of the mansion. Janelle's hands, usually steady from years of domestic work, trembled as she rocked the 3-month-old girl, her own dark curls damp with the silent stress that had permeated the house for weeks. The infant's face was blotchy, exhausted from hours of inconsolable wailing. "She won't take the bottle," Janelle, the primary nanny, a woman named Beverly, had announced in a high-pitched panic before dramatically gathering her things and walking out the door. "She hasn't eaten properly since Mrs. Sterling passed. I can't handle this pressure anymore." Now, the burden of care and the deep, silent anxiety that came with it settled squarely on Janelle's shoulders. She sat alone in the lavish, pale blue nursery, staring down at the fragile child in her arms. Willow Sterling, barely 3 months old, her tiny fists feebly flailing as she let out another rasping scream, her delicate lips trembling. The tragedy of Amelia Sterling's sudden death still hung heavy over the house like a suffocating shroud. They called it a swift, aggressive case of pneumonia. One moment, the brilliant, laughing wife of Jonathan Sterling, a titan of industry and finance, was vibrant in the garden with her baby. The next, she was a beautiful, devastating memory. Since then, the billionaire father, Mr. Sterling, had completely submerged himself in the operations of his investment firm in Manhattan, unable to face the crippling grief of his loss, or perhaps the sight of the daughter who was her spitting image. The remaining staff whispered that he hardly looked at his daughter anymore, and now the baby was suffering for his absence, his emotional unavailability. Janelle tried again, tipping the sterile glass bottle toward Willow's mouth. "Please, sweet girl," she whispered, her voice husky with desperation. "You have to eat." But the infant only turned her head weakly, rejecting the cold rubber nipple, her cries fading into pitiful, strengthless whimpers. Janelle's heart clenched, a deep, sickening twist of pain. She couldn't watch another baby starve. Not after what she herself had endured. Just 3 months prior, she had buried her own newborn son, a brief, beautiful life extinguished too soon by complications. She could still vividly remember the sterile, white hospital room in Queens, the nurses whispering hollow condolences, and the cruel, biological reality of her milk coming in as if mocking her empty, aching arms. She hadn't been able to stop the process. Her body had kept producing milk, a painful, constant reminder of loss, even after her heart had been shattered. And now, holding Willow close, feeling the baby's small, starving body, she felt an ache so deep it nearly consumed her. Janelle bit her lip hard, glancing quickly toward the door of the nursery, her mind racing, fighting against the rational, the professional, the acceptable. "I can't let you starve," she whispered to the child, her voice barely a breath. "Forgive me if this is wrong." With shaking, determined hands, she unbuttoned the top of her neat, starched uniform, pulling the baby closer, aligning the infant's head to her chest. The second her breast brushed Willow's lips, the infant stopped crying. An instinct older than memory took over, and the child latched on, a desperate, immediate suckling that was both painful and profoundly relieving. Janelle gasped softly, not in distress, but in the overwhelming rush of emotion as the baby's weak sucking grew stronger, a steady, rhythmic pull. Willow's tiny body relaxed completely for the first time in hours, her fragile tension melting away. Tears, hot and heavy, blurred Janelle's vision as she stroked the baby's silken cheek with one finger. "That's it, sweet girl," she murmured, her voice thick with tears she couldn't stop. "Eat. Stay alive. Your mama isn't here, but I am. I'm here." She was so completely focused on the miracle happening in her arms, the sound of the gulping, the palpable energy of a life taking sustenance, that she didn't hear the footsteps, slow and deliberate, approaching the nursery door. Janelle, the deep, unfamiliar voice, controlled yet holding a seismic tremor of shock, froze her in place. The milk in her throat suddenly felt like a choking obstruction. She turned her head slowly, painstakingly, the world narrowing to the man standing rigidly in the doorway. In the frame stood Jonathan Sterling. His tailored, bespoke suit, flown in from Savile Row, was as immaculate as always, but his sharp, usually guarded eyes were wide, completely blown open in an expression of raw, unadulterated shock. For a suspended, eternal moment, no one spoke. Willow, oblivious to the thunderous tension crackling in the expensive air, simply suckled softly. What are you doing? He finally managed, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Janelle's mouth went instantly dry. Sir, I can explain. Explain. His eyes narrowed, and he stepped into the room, the single motion filling the space with his overwhelming, intimidating presence. I leave for one day to handle a crisis, and I come home to find my maid breastfeeding my child. His voice rose with each word, becoming a cutting, booming accusation that rattled the expensive glass figurines on the mahogany dresser. Janelle felt her throat tighten, the primal protective instinct momentarily overpowering her fear of his authority. She wasn't eating, she said softly, her voice struggling for purchase against his anger. She refused the bottle for hours. I didn't know what else to do. She needed the milk. And you think this is your place? He barked, his face contorted with fury and perhaps confusion. To feed my daughter, to touch her, as if she were your own? She was starving. Janelle snapped back, the words bolting from her before she could possibly stop them. They hung in the air, bold and defiant, a devastating truth hurled at the man who had abandoned his child to the care of strangers. Mr. Sterling stared at her, his face a mask of unreadable granite. Janelle looked down at Willow, who had finally fallen asleep, her tiny milk-drunk fist resting trustingly on Janelle's chest. Her resolve solidified. Fire me if you want, Mr. Sterling, Janelle whispered, meeting his gaze without flinching. But she needed me. Mr. Sterling took a long, ragged, shaky breath, his expression softening for the briefest moment as his gaze finally settled on his sleeping daughter. You've been hiding this from me, he said, his voice dropping, the anger siphoned away by something else, a deep, weary realization. Why? Janelle's lips quivered. Because you wouldn't understand, she said, the tears finally starting to slide down her cheeks. And because I lost my own baby 3 months ago. He froze, his entire formidable posture locking up. You what? I buried my son, she whispered, not ashamed of the tears now. And I still had milk. Your daughter wouldn't eat, and I couldn't stand by and watch her suffer. I couldn't let another baby go hungry. The room fell silent, the only sound the soft, rhythmic breathing of the peaceful baby. Mr. Sterling looked at her for a long, agonizing moment, then turned abruptly toward the door, his custom leather shoes sinking silently into the expensive carpet. Bring her to my study when she wakes up, he said stiffly, his back to her, his voice devoid of any emotion she could decipher. We need to talk. Properly. As he left, Janelle felt her heart sink. Was this the inevitable, immediate end of her employment, of firing with cause, or the terrifying, bewildering beginning of something she couldn't possibly yet imagine? The new arrangement. Janelle sat rigidly on the edge of a custom leather chair in Mr. Sterling's enormous, wood-paneled study, an office that felt more like a corporate command center in Midtown, NYC than a room in a family home. Her fingers were twisting the hem of her simple apron, a futile attempt to ground herself. Every second felt like a torturous hour as she replayed his chilling, cryptic words. We need to talk. What would he say? Would he be cold, analytical, fire her, and have security escort her off the premises of Fairbanks Manor? The sound of his heavy, deliberate footsteps approaching the door made her stomach lurch. He walked in slowly, shutting the massive door behind him with a soft, final click. Willow, having fed deeply, slept soundly and peacefully in Janelle's arms, utterly unaware of the storm brewing around her. Mr. Sterling didn't immediately approach. He walked to the window, staring out at the sprawling, perfectly manicured estate grounds for a long, profound moment before finally speaking. You didn't ask me, he said. His voice was calm, controlled, but the razor-sharp edge of authority was still present, making Janelle's heart pound against her ribs. "I didn't have time, sir," she replied quietly, her voice steadier than she felt. She was starving. She wouldn't take the bottle. I panicked for her. He turned to face her, his sharp features still unreadable, but the fury had been replaced by a deep, hollow exhaustion. "You panicked and decided to feed my child as if she were your own." Janelle swallowed hard, fighting for the clarity of her actions. "Sir, I know the procedure was wrong, but after her mother died, she's been refusing everyone. She needed warmth, comfort, contact, and milk. I was the only one in that moment who could provide all of it to her." Mr. Sterling walked closer, finally allowing himself to look not at Janelle, but at Willow's peaceful face. "And what about you?" he asked, his voice softening, becoming less of a command and more of a question born of shock. "You didn't think about what this would do to you? The risk you were taking?" Janelle's lips trembled, and she finally allowed the full story to leave her. "I lost my son 3 months ago," she whispered, the raw truth of it echoing in the quiet room. "I buried him. My body didn't understand he was gone. I still produced milk. Every time I felt it, it reminded me of him, of my empty life. And then I saw your baby suffering, fading. I couldn't turn away. I simply couldn't." Silence descended again, heavy with unspoken grief. Janelle looked down, waiting for the inevitable axe to fall. "If you want me gone, I understand," she said softly, resigned. "But please, Mr. Sterling, don't let her go hungry again." There was an achingly long pause before Mr. Sterling spoke, and when he did, his voice had changed completely, losing its corporate edge and revealing the broken man beneath. "I thought I had lost everything when my wife died," he said, his voice low, almost a confession. "But seeing you with her, the way she calmed down instantly, it's the first time Willow has looked whole again. The first time she's looked alive." Janelle blinked in surprise. "You're not angry?" He shook his head slowly, a profound weariness in the gesture. "I was at first outraged because it violated a boundary I didn't even know existed. But now I realize I've been utterly failing her, hiding behind my work, behind my grief, pretending money could fix this. You stepped in where I didn't, where I couldn't." Mr. Sterling walked over and gently, hesitantly, brushed his fingers against his daughter's tiny, sleeping hand. "She is alive and well-fed because of you," he murmured, the admission costing him everything. Janelle's eyes welled up again, this time not with fear, but with an unexpected, overwhelming sense of shared humanity. "I was only doing what any mother would do, sir," she said simply. "That's just it," he replied softly, looking up at her, a profound realization shining in his eyes. "You gave her what she needed most. Not just food from a can, but comfort, connection, and profound, unconditional love." He straightened up, the billionaire facade returning slightly, but gentler now. "I want you to stay," he said firmly. Janelle's eyes widened. "Stay? But as what?" "Yes, stay," he repeated, walking over to his desk. "Not just as a maid, as Willow's caregiver, her primary attachment figure, her second mother. We'll arrange legal terms, a full salary, a new apartment in the Upper East Side staff quarters, not the basement. You will want for nothing, and you will focus only on her." Janelle's heart thudded violently in her chest. The offer too generous, too sudden, too much of a complete reversal. "Sir, that's too much. I can't possibly accept a title like that." "You already have accepted the responsibility," he interrupted gently, a faint smile finally touching his lips. "And I trust you now, Janelle, more than anyone else in this entire manor." News of Mr. Sterling's astonishing decision spread like wildfire among the staff. "Did you hear? He's keeping her on, not as a maid, but as family, as the baby's mother." Some whispered in shock, scandalized by the breach of class and convention, their rigid views of the social hierarchy shattered. Others, particularly the older servants, nodded approvingly, recognizing the undeniable power of a mother's true instinct. Weeks later, the atmosphere in Fairbanks Manor had changed. The oppressive silence was replaced with the soft sounds of a baby's coos and the gentle humming of a woman's song. Janelle sat comfortably on the mansion's sun-drenched patio, a place she was never allowed before, with Willow nestled securely against her chest. Mr. Sterling watched them from the doorway, not with surveillance, but with quiet, contemplative peace. A faint, genuine smile, the first the staff had seen since his wife's death, tugged at his lips. "You saved her, Janelle," he said, his voice a quiet affirmation. Janelle looked up, her eyes soft, gazing past the wealthy facade to the grateful man beneath. "She saved me, too, Mr. Sterling," she replied simply. "She gave me back a purpose I thought was gone forever." For the first time in months, the Fairbanks Manor felt less like a monument to a forgotten life and more like a true, quiet home. And for Janelle, a woman who thought she'd lost everything in the sterile, cold hospital room of Queens, it was the unexpected, beautiful beginning of a new chapter, a redemption story written in the purest, most selfless act of love.